The movie begins with a young woman being questioned by soldiers in Europe. In the background, we hear her voice saying that she will write a letter to her uncle, telling him about what she is going through. Her uncle, Lo, is the main character of the story. He has escaped the terrible events in his country and arrived in the United States as a refugee. In America, Yo goes to a woman's house, but she seems uncomfortable with him. He realizes that what bothers her is a part of her body that is not symmetrical. Since Lo is an architect, he is very focused on perfect design and structure. Later, Lo meets his cousin, who gives him surprising news. His wife is still alive in Europe. The cousin has received a letter from Lo's niece, the young woman we saw at the beginning. Overcome with emotion, Lo cries and hopes to reconnect with his wife through letters. His cousin and his cousin's wife welcome him into their home, giving him a room to stay in. They explain that they have changed their old religion to fit into the Christian society of the United States. Lo's cousin owns a furniture company and offers him a job, knowing that Lo was once a well-respected designer in Europe. The next morning, Lo waits in line for free food, but the supplies run out before it's his turn. He and many others, including children, are left hungry. That day, Lo begins exchanging letters with his wife. Meanwhile, his cousin gets them a job from a wealthy young man who wants them to reorganize his father's library as a surprise gift. The young man offers less than $1,000, but Lo insists they need at least $2,000. When they close the deal, Lo, his cousin, and his cousin's wife celebrate by drinking and dancing. His cousin pushes him to dance with his wife, saying she is beautiful, and the three dance together. Later, when they are alone, the cousin's wife, Suli, tells Lo he should find another job and a new place to live. Lo realizes he is becoming a burden and promises to leave as soon as possible. For the library project, Yo designs a system with doors on the shelves to create symmetry and a chair with a metal arm that holds the chosen book. But before they can finish, the young man's father comes home and gets angry as he dislikes surprises. Yo tries to explain the design, but the man yells at them to leave. The next day, Lo's cousin tells him that the young man is furious and refuses to pay them. He also accuses Lo of making advances toward his wife. Though Lo knows this is a lie, he stays silent, and his cousin kicks him out of the house. Lo ends up sleeping in a community center. He takes a substance to ease the pain from an old injury to his nose. A nun at the center tries to make him beg for money, but Lo refuses to lower himself that way. Lo starts working shoveling coal. One day, the owner of the library project finds him and tells him that his design was praised and even published in a magazine. She says she looked into his background and learned that he was a well-known architect in Europe. She pays him the money that her son refused to give him and invites him to a meeting at her house. That night, Lo goes out partying in the city's underworld and continues using a substance that numbs his pain. A few days later, he attends an elegant dinner at the library owner's home. During the meal, the guests ask him about the terrible things he went through in Europe. Yo answers bitterly, saying that his wife and young nieces are still there. One of the guests offers to help bring them to America. Yo is grateful and also thanks the library owner, Mr. Queenie, for bringing everyone together to make this possible. Later, Yo talks privately with Mr. Queenie, who asks him why he became an architect. Lo explains that buildings last even after people judge a society as good or bad. Mr. Queenie is impressed. At the end of the night, he gathers his guests outside and announces that he wants to build a special building in honor of his late mother, one where the people of the city can meet and spend time together. He offers Lo the job of designing it. Lo, overwhelmed with emotion, accepts, knowing he can finally return to the profession he loves. The next day, Lo is given a long list of things to include in the building: a library, a gym, a church, and an auditorium. It seems impossible to fit everything in one design, but he accepts the challenge. He receives a letter from his wife saying that she and his niece will soon be able to travel to America. Excited, he begins working on the project. He must make a Christian church the centerpiece, even though it is not part of his own faith. Another architect involved in the project dislikes his design, but Mr. Queenie trusts him and approves it. Some investors are hesitant about Lowe because he is a foreigner with a different religion. To ease their concerns, he presents his design for the church and assures them it will respect their traditions. His plan convinces them, and construction begins. Lowe is finally reunited with his wife and niece. However, he is shocked to find that his wife is now in a wheelchair. At dinner with Mr. Queenie, she impresses everyone by speaking perfect English and revealing that she is a respected journalist. That night, she tells Lowe that she missed him so much that she imagined everything he was doing in America. She knows he was unfaithful, but says she forgives him. Yo breaks down in tears and admits that he is exhausted from everything he has been through in this country. His wife reassures him, telling him this is their chance to start fresh. At work, another architect tries to change Lowe's design to make the project cheaper. Yo refuses and fights to keep his vision intact. Mr. Queenie supports him. It is revealed that this second architect was only included in the project because he is Christian, which made the investors feel more comfortable. To cover the extra costs of his design, Lowe gives up his own earnings as an architect, happily sacrificing his commission to ensure the project is done right. One day, Mr. Queenie's son shamelessly tells Lowe that he wants to sleep with his niece. Furious, Lowe tells him to show respect, but the young man coldly reminds him that he is only allowed to stay in the country because they tolerate him. Yo's wife supports his decision to use his commission money to complete the building as he planned. She has started working at a newspaper, so they will have enough money to live on. However, tragedy strikes when workers on the project are involved in a terrible accident. To avoid bad press, Mr. Queenie cancels the entire project. Lo loses his job and his home, forcing him to move to New York, where his wife works. Years pass. Yo eventually finds work as an architect, though now as part of a team rather than leading projects. His niece gets married and plans to return to her home country because she never learned English and never felt comfortable in America. At first, Lowe and his wife are against it, but they eventually understand and give her their blessing. Meanwhile, Mr. Queenie contacts Lowe to restart the canceled project. They travel together to the mountains to find special materials for the building's finishes. Mr. Queenie is fascinated by the beauty of the stone they find. That night, they attend a party and get very drunk. Later, alone in an alley, Mr. Queenie begins talking about Lowe's background as a foreigner. He accuses Lowe of thinking too highly of himself because of where he comes from. Then, he takes advantage of Lowe. The next morning, they both act as if nothing happened and return to work. However, Lowe is deeply affected by what happened. Frustrated and in pain, he starts lashing out at his workers. His wife notices that he isn't acting like himself, and they argue. She vents her own frustrations, saying that as a respected journalist, she shouldn't have to waste time writing about makeup. One night, his wife experiences extreme pain from her old injuries, but she has run out of medicine. Desperate, Lowe gives her some of the illegal substance he had hidden. He also takes some himself. In his altered state, he unintentionally hurts her, and she ends up in the hospital. Once she recovers, she tells Lowe that while they were under the influence, he confessed that Mr. Queenie had taken advantage of him. She is disgusted, saying that this country is full of corruption and that they must return to their homeland. Before leaving, his wife bravely walks on crutches to Mr. Queenie's house. In front of his guests, she exposes him and demands justice for her husband. Mr. Queenie remains silent at first, but then dismisses her accusations as lies. His son violently throws her to the ground and drags her out, shocking and angering the guests. Later, Mr. Queenie disappears. His son organizes a search party, and they eventually find his body in the unfinished building, right where the church was supposed to be. Many years later, a tribute is held in Lowe's honor for his work as an architect. His niece speaks about a project he completed in his homeland, a building that represents both the suffering he endured in America and the deep bond he shared with his wife.